we're out here. This is the field where the magic happens.
Benning Bites with Damon Benning. Benning Bites with Damon Benning.
Another episode of Benning Bites. Appreciate it. Brought to you by Underdog Fantasy Sports. Really, really easy to take advantage of. Great website. Probably even a better app. It's close. Very user-friendly. Just enter the promo code Benning. It's BENNING. Daily Sports Fantasy. Relatively easy to use, too. Just higher or lower. And it is right there, regardless of sport. It's Underdog Fantasy Sports. Fantastic show today. Little squirrely. I know you're surprised, especially for a Monday. We righted the ship in a hurry. Well, maybe. Depends on how straight you want to drive your ship. But some fantastic stuff came up, and we do appreciate it, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Facebook, Twitch, just regular old X, AM radio. Because remember, folks, it's still AM radio. Ravi was on a roll, and it's not often. Sometimes, like mid-question, I'll pause just to make sure that I don't just spot out something ridiculous. I know you guys have a hard time believing that, but there's a couple questions. We were talking about basketball and kind of the transformation, and we've talked about it a little bit with Coach Hoiberg and with Nate, and just the additions to the staff and moving guys in and moving guys out, and how they almost reinvented themselves on the fly. And this is fresh on the heels of winning a game in which, Sejan and Bryce, they combined 2 of 18, right? And Nebraska won comfortably against a top 15 opponent in UCLA. And, we're having this conversation about their evolution and kind of what team they can be going forward. We went through the next 4 games with Rutgers and Purdue, and then Iowa, then Purdue, then Rutgers, then Maryland. And are we to the point now with this basketball team where we can start to pencil in saying things like, well, they need to go 2-2 in these next 4, or do we just need to stay right where we are and say, listen, start with getting a win at Iowa City? Because sometimes as a fan base, we're kind of afraid to embrace expectations, and we don't really want to say it out loud. And there's just lots of things that go into that, especially with Nebraska basketball, which has been kind of traumatizing for Nebraska basketball fans. And on the heels of this conversation, we got a couple of comments in our streaming page where one of our listeners, Ken, said, not sure if this is a hot take or not, or maybe he said it was a hot take, but he said, in his opinion, he thinks it would be easier for Nebraska basketball in this day and age of the college athletics landscape to be more consistently ranked in the top 10 than football. And it was such an interesting thought that I had to kind of table it and come back to it, because I have to think about it for a little bit, even during the duration of the show, because a lot of times hard topics will come up or thoughtful things, and it's like, okay, I can adjust. And sometimes Ravi, will ask like tough questions. And the thing about live radio is sometimes you have to have those responses with some sort of immediacy. But this one was interesting because at first blush, I'm like, there's no way. This is a program that has never even won an NCAA tournament game, where not in IT. I'm talking the field of 64 and 68, formerly 32, if you're doing math at home. And then I thought about it going forward, and would I entertain that discussion? Top 10, Nebraska be in the top 10 in basketball before they're in the top 10 in football? Not an easy answer. And this is coming from someone that is all in on the football program. I love the direction. You guys know how I feel about Coach Rhule. I feel like this staff on paper has some incredible diversity, right? The smarts and the know-how and experience of the Holgersons and the Phil Snows and the relationship ability of Shaquille Shorts and Addison and the teaching of Dvorak and Raiola and just it's wide ranging in terms of the fingerprints now that Coach Rhule can put on different facets of the program that need a personal Coach Rhule touch. I still think it's interesting in the collegiate landscape with NIL and transfer portal. And this is nothing different than basketball deals with in their respective sport. And this is on the heels. What really got me thinking about this was on the heels of Ravi doing some research. We were talking about why I didn't like the college football playoff expansion to 12 because you don't get back-to-back upsets and double-digit, dogs winning games in consecutive weeks. So why would we go to 12? And I told him, I didn't like the basketball analogy because you can hit game winners or last-second shots, and it takes fewer people. And so he did a deep dive into non-blue bloods since 1985. Of the 156 or however many times that it happened, how many times a non-blue blood number 6 or lower seed had made the Final Four? And it was 13 or 14 times, which was an incredibly low number for non-blue blood long shots. So you would think with all that data, I would be quick to say, oh, man, of course Nebraska football could be top 10 before Nebraska basketball. But would I? I don't know. Hit us up tomorrow, 888-638-4876 on if that's a hot take by our listener Ken or not. It's another episode of Benning Bites.
A Hurrdat Sports Network production.